And we're live. Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to SpillinNliftin's episode 4, where we're going to have a conversation on the topic of grief. I am delighted that we have two wonderful guests with us, Reverend Dr. Aileen Curtin and Reginald Braxton. Aileen is joining us from Florida. Reggie is joining us from Puerto Rico. And of course, our co host, Sherry, who's joining us from Maryland. So thank you all for joining the conversation today. It's going to be a very rich discussion. Um, I'm going to start by asking both Aileen and Reggie to introduce yourselves as you would like to be introduced. I did share your bios, so people have probably seen that, but I think it would be helpful for them to hear your voice saying hello and introduce yourselves as you would like to be introduced, and maybe a brief description of what it is that you do. So, Aileen, would you like to go
So, shall
first,
we do
please?
ladies first? All right.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Thank you,
yes.
Reggie. So, good morning, everybody. I am Aileen, I'm a native of Ireland, lived there until the tender age of 27, immigrated, and I have been spent a lifetime as an educator, elementary, middle school teacher, university professor. And so I had 18 years in that field, and then I'm now in Florida playing out I call it the third career phase. So I'm now an ordained minister. I work as an end-of-life doula with a local hospice, and I teach yoga. So I have moved out of the constraints of the institutionalized educational systems, where now I'm able to help people as we move towards, many of us move towards the third phase of our lives, moving into retirement, moving towards that dreaded D word, death and dying, and all of that. So I help people understand as a death doula. I educate families, I educate an individual who may have a diagnosis on what to expect from the process of death, understanding all of that, how to prepare for it, helping families as well. And also as an ordained minister, I do celebrations of life, do weddings, the usual things that you would expect an ordained minister to do. And then as a yoga teacher, I help people understand their bodies and release and let go. And I think that's a good overview for now. So that's what I'm doing
Great.
currently.
Great. Thank you, Aileen.
Wow, that's impressive.
Reggie.
I should have gone first. Uh, my name's Reggie Braxton, and I'm a retired slash stuff. I've been an educator, musician, clinician, um, father, husband, and now in retirement, I'm just the type of person who just wants to help, day to day from whatever comes in my path. I'm living in Puerto Rico with my wife and dog, and just kind of taking each day at a time. If someone comes across my path that I think that needs help, and what I do as a doula, then I help. I've done some work in Hampton with Centera Hospice, also helping those that are, the families that are with patients or clients that are near to death and counseling, and for those that have already, transitioned, helping with counseling. I think early we'll learn that I just had a different perspective about transition. I don't call it death. It's just another transition. So, working as a doula, I try to make those that are in transition as comfortable as possible. And a lot of times that works with the family learning how to allow them to be comfortable also. So that's where I am right now.
Wonderful.
Okay. Great, great. Thank you. Thank you. As you were talking, I was also reminded of something you said to me when I invited you to join us as a guest. And you reminded me that grief is not just associated with end of life. You can grieve the loss of a relationship. You can grieve the loss of a job. There are many things that you can lose in life, and grief is a part of that process. Um, so that was a good reminder for me. But I think for the scope of this conversation today, we really will focus more on end of life. So I want to kick off by asking a question that both Sherry and I answered in preparation for this conversation today, and I'm going to ask that question of both you, Reggie, and Aileen. What has been the most poignant experience that you have had with grief, either you personally or one of your clients that you've worked with? I'm going to go back to Aileen.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would say for me, as we're just talking about death, is I would say the most poignant would be my own personal experiences of it first. As a child, seeing my mother go through the grief of her mother and noticing how she always said, my life will never be the same. I can't live without my mother. And that actually came to pass. And so for me, what I've noticed the most poignant experience still today is I will notice when somebody, I use the word death and dying. So that's part of my culture in Ireland. We do not want to soften it. We want to remind ourselves daily that death is a presence in our lives. We carry death on our shoulders, and with death comes grief, and that we are grief walkers. So that's an expression that I came across years ago, and it reminds me that how we live our lives is how we navigate grief, how we navigate change, how we navigate death. So for me, my most poignant experience was with that as a child, and noticing then as I grew up, being very sensitive to the grief of others. And so always feeling that I could feel other people's grief, but also knowing how that people did not have the ability to allow that grief, to live through it, because once we live through it and we get through to the other side, you'll realize that grief is not a feeling, but it is a skill. It's the opposite twin of grief, and it's being able to praise and joyfully celebrate maybe the life of that person who passed, who transitioned. And so realizing that grief is a practice, it's how we live life, and it isn't just a one-time event. We are constantly encountering grief, and as we get older, it becomes a practice of letting go. So for me, it's accepting and understanding what it is, recognizing that even if we are experiencing grief, that we still have time to live our lives, to find joy, and to focus on that as well.
Now, I think for me, of course, I've had many family members and friends, that have passed on. But it was really, even as a child, when my parents died, uh, it I didn't really go through a lot of grief because I didn't feel I was losing them. And I can remember experiences where people thought I should be sad or struggling. And because I wasn't, they said, well, that's a little bit odd. Maybe you're denying or hiding something, but I really wasn't hiding anything because I didn't feel the loss. But I think my most poignant times was experiencing grief through someone else. And first, it was my wife when her sister died. and because she died at an early age. And then I witnessed my wife show signs of grief like every holiday, and I didn't really understand what grief was at the time, but I did notice that she had a difficult time certain times of the year, and that's because she was still grieving her sister. And I think the next most poignant time was when my daughter's husband died, and then I actually got to see grief full hand. From debilitating to growing through that. So those are the two most poignant times. Witnessing it through others, and it gives you a different perspective and how to help them because you're watching it, and then you can see the stages that are happening. And in a sense, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to get more into this as a way of helping others.
Okay. So, let me ask this. What support do you find most meaningful and helpful when grief is fresh? Everybody wants to uh, offer condolences to be helpful and supportive, but many times we don't know how and we don't know what to do or what to say. What have you
Yeah.
found to be most meaningful?
So for me, this is where my Celtic Irish tradition comes in. So growing up in Ireland, we always stop for death. Death is honored. So if somebody dies in the community, in the family, you stop. There's a funeral. There is a container. There's a ritual for this grief, and generally it's that initial 3 days, or maybe it could be a week around that time. So as a child growing up in Ireland, I witnessed that. I witnessed a lot of people uh, being laid out with open caskets where people would come, you view the body, you see it for yourself. So you're actually, and you're taking that time to cry, to grieve, to tell stories, to share. So there's a collective communal sharing. So what I've noticed then when I came to the United States, it was like, shh, you don't mention that word. You don't take time off. Bodies are just very silently removed and cremated, and nobody talks about it. And so that was one of my impetuses for becoming an end-of-life doula, was to help people understand that death needs to be celebrated. It's part of life. We're here. We are all going to die. It's not if, it's when.
Right.
And so for me, that is the most I have noticed in families or in people, when they don't stop to have that ritual, that funeral, that celebration of life, that the grief becomes stuck within people. They
Mm-hmm.
carry it for years because they've never had that ritual where they can express it. And so for me, I will be with families or with a loved one who is going to die, and he or she will say, I don't want a funeral, I just don't want to plan anything. And I will say, but it's not about you, it's about your loved ones who will miss you. So the funerals and the rituals are not for the individual who is in fact dying or transitioning.
Right.
It's really for those of us who are left. We need that. That becomes part of the process. So if I would say anything, I would love to see more time for people to stop, to take a break from their work, from their ordinary routines, and to really go into the process of grieving, to feel it. So for me, that is the best support, the rituals that we have around death and dying.
And I agree. I think you have to stop and process a reality. And my advice and my experience, I think the best thing that you could do is to say nothing, but just be there. and just allow them to process whatever it is they're feeling without feeling any religious or whatever kind of or cultural rules that say that what you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. Because those that are, that are dying, they're the most important at the time, to express their feelings. And they have 5 stages of grief also. But then once for the family going through those stages, they need to be able to process, stop, continue to communicate and talk about the person and just express their feelings. And if they don't feel like saying anything, then they shouldn't have to say anything. But you're still there that when they want to say something, you're there for them. Not to change their mind, but just to allow them to express their grief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reggie, can I follow up a little bit on that? Because you talked about the stages that the individual goes through in the process of dying.
Mhm.
And I don't know anything about that. I wouldn't know what to expect. Can you talk a little bit about what an individual might experience? And I'm sure it's maybe a little different for different people, handle it differently. But what have you seen?
Well, let me look at. I'm looking at the stages of grief that most people think about for those that are remaining. They go through denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, right? Well, someone that is dying, they go through the same thing.
Wow.
They're depressed about their particular situation. They're angry. Why me? Why am I going through this right now? Many of them want to bargain with God. Well, if I'm better to my wife or my dog, then maybe you'll spare me. And then the last part is acceptance. When they have accepted when this is what's going to happen, um,
Mm-hmm.
and and I feel that in both cases, for those that are dying and for those that are grieving that are still alive, that acceptance is the most productive stage, I think, because
Mm-hmm.
then they can start to move on. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I can remember my mom when she was dying. She was ready to go. She had been ready to go. She died at 92. She lost all her friends. They all the friends that died. She was living alone. So she kept saying, I'm tired. I'm ready to go. And I'm always saying, well, hey, mom, you might outlive me. Well, the night before she died, she had a choice. She could have remained and gone to the hospital, but she chose, no, it's time to go. And that was a part of acceptance that although she understood, we still didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And, we try to keep people alive forever, but it's not always up to us. It's up to what the soul wants to do and what the spirit, has in mind for our journey. So those are my thoughts on it.
Wow. I'm struck about how
Aileen?
much.
Oh,
Oh, I'm
okay.
sorry.
Sorry. Go, Sherry.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, I'm hearing also a lot about culture and community when we talk about
Mm-hmm.
death and
Yes.
how, that does influence what we think about it and how we experience it and what we learn. And I suspect also some of our practices or some of our reactions to death and dying are learned behaviors from what we see other people do or not do.
Hmm.
It just struck me as I'm looking at our questions. I didn't even think about the cultural and just that aspect of it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very good point. And of course, a lot of you might have heard about Irish funerals, that
Yes.
the Irish, we drink and do merry and laugh at our funerals and cry at the weddings. So, and it is very much, what I grew up in, and the idea of, yes, the person is moving on, but we also, there's a joy in death
Mhm.
too. So I think that's the part for me that I think and reflect for myself, because one of the rituals that we do in Ireland is when somebody has lost somebody, you wear a little band around your elbow area, and it indicates to other people that you are in grief. And usually you would wear that, or we would wear dark clothing for about a year, so that people around you or people you worked with or even strangers would know that you were in somewhere in the process of grieving. That has dissipated in our modern day lives. So nobody has that time anymore. We've got, people say, well, you've got to move on after 3 days, after 3 weeks. Good grief. What are you grieving about? Get on with your life. But it really is a process, particularly on how close the member of the person who died is. It's a process that can take at least a year, maybe even 2 years. And especially the awareness of those around you who might understand that you are shifting, that you're going to make changes in your life, you're going to maybe relocate, and they're understanding all of these changes without judging it, but having an understanding. So the symbolism of maybe wearing something on the outside was a way of signaling to other people, I'm in grief, either leave me alone or say something, understand what I'm going through. So in other words, making something that is very invisible, hidden inside, making it visible to others on the outside.
Interesting. I mean, I see huge cultural differences in how we handle death and those who are in the process of dying versus what you experience in Ireland. Um, I'll just share. I've lost both my parents. The most poignant experience I had with death was my mother's death, because my sister and I both cared for her for a number of years before she died. But I found that my experience when my mother died was that I was very consumed in the administrative tasks, handling this, handling that, paperwork, this, da da da,
Yeah.
this logistic, that logistic. And I think a part of that was that when my mother died, she clearly was not ready. Her physical body gave out, but her mind and her spirit was not ready to leave this plane. So she didn't go through the stages and getting to the point of acceptance. She was still in denial. So I think that for both I will speak for my sister, but for both of us who were witnessing this, we didn't have an opportunity to go through any phases, and it was all about the business of the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I still go through, and I'm going through the stages of grieving for my mother, because now all of the paperwork is done. I've had plenty of time to sit with it. Um, and I'm not sure where my sister's head is in all this, because we haven't talked a lot about it. And I think culturally, that's kind of typical for us in the United States. We do the work, we go through the process of the administrative and the surface stuff, but we don't really process the emotional piece of experiencing death of a loved one. That's
Let
my
me say
opinion.
that's a good point, and this is a little bit change, but culturally, when you look at the African cultures or the Native Indian aspect of how they look at transition and death, they've got a cultural system that they follow.
Yeah.
which they know what's, when you die, they know what's going to happen next. In America, we don't. We want to handle the processes, the bills, closing out the accounts. And that's one reason that those things need to be handled well in advance,
Uh,
so that when it's time, you can take those elements out of the picture, the emotional elements, the business elements out of the picture, and spend the time dealing with the emotional and the spiritual. And then you have time to grieve and focus on that grief in those last days when the family is there, when you can actually help the rest of the family.
yeah.
Because we're the center, whoever is the closest to those that have died, we're who everyone else is watching.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if those people can turn it around and help the rest of the family, because we don't have to deal with the business part, it really helps a lot.
And that's another way to maybe safeguard those rituals and
Yes.
cultural norms and community things that somehow they seem like they're lost, like you say, Reggie.
Yeah.
Um, for me, on this past Friday marked the 4th anniversary of my husband's passing. So it's been 4 years, and I still feel like I'm grieving.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that was the most poignant because I lived with this person for 40 years. It's even though every person who's left my life, I feel like has been poignant for some reason. For my husband's passing, I understood for the first time what people mean when they say, I feel like I've lost a piece of my physical self, you know. And for my family, I used to tell people I am the oldest of a younger family. My husband was the youngest of an older family. So my siblings grew up with my husband, and for all intents and purposes, he was their brother. He was their sibling too. And so we've all been grieving for a while. Anyway, different experiences are poignant for different reasons. Let's see. I'm looking at about 9:25, so there's so much that we could talk about.
Hey,
Yes,
Sherry,
yes,
can I,
yes.
for four, to grieve for 4 years, to grieve for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, that's okay.
Yeah.
I was reading an article about Prince's girlfriend,
Oh,
and this
wow.
is the anniversary of Prince's death. And she was saying that there were his last girlfriend, I would say. And she was saying that there are a lot of stories and a lot of people want to take energy from his death in stories. But she was saying it's been 10 years and she's still grieving him.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I don't think there's a time limit to grief, because I believe as long as you are thinking of that person, then you are continuing, that process. And it's a lifetime. Holidays,
Mm.
you know, certain restaurants, and then you turn those things, I tell people, turn those things into good memories,
Yeah.
because you have a choice, because they're going to come around. And so we turn those things into kind of like memories of them still being with us, because they are, except for the physical.
Yeah. My my family says that every day. Oh, you know what Gerald would say. Oh, you know what Gerald would do.
Yes.
And I kind of move into that because I'm looking at our questions here and I'm thinking, well, that's also a good way of getting to the healing part of
Yes.
things.
Yes.
And I'm glad that you said that, because it is, we don't just forget about the person. We carry that. They're part of us. They're part of our DNA, particularly if it was a parent and there's a biological connection. So yes, talking about them, including them in all aspects of our lives, because
Mm.
they're, especially, but they're with us. They're
Yes.
still here, and very important.
Yeah.
one thing I learned, I asked, I was in a session and they were asked, well, what do you like about your husband the most? And, the answer was he was kind, he was thoughtful, he was a good conversationalist, he was a good protector. And the counselor says, well, he can still be all of those things because none of those have left. She didn't say, well, he took out the trash or the physical things.
Yeah.
Those were all emotional and conscious level things. And those things remain with us even now. I can still remember talking with my mom or arguing with my mom about stuff, in the last days. And still those things aren't resolved. And it still makes me think of her,
Mm.
when as part of that process of her still being with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think I agree wholeheartedly that um, acknowledging and recognizing how your loved one is still in your life and influences your life is so important and helpful going through a grief process. Which, I mean, for you, Sherry, being married for 40 years, I know I can see that you will always
Yeah.
look back and recall Gerald in circumstances and funny stories, and I think that is a an important part of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you had to think of our American Western culture, um, what would you say would be one or two really important things that you would want people to understand about the grief process that they probably don't?
Mm.
Mhm.
Well, for me, one of the things, of course, I'm a yoga teacher, so a lot of, when I lead a yoga class, I never know here in St. Petersburg because it is a high tourist area. I never know what somebody may be going through. So one of the things that I will always remind people is keep moving, go out into nature.
Mm.
You keep going with your life. We honor our loved ones by living our life. Yes, we can feel the pain and we can feel the grief, but grieving it's a process of surrender, acceptance, letting go, and feeling the grief. So when you do a yoga class or you do any kind of walk or movement, that's very mindful. You're not just on your phone, you're focused, maybe you're meditating, maybe you're praying. It's just allowing that feeling, however we feel it. We do feel it as a sort of a contraction in the heart. It is painful. It is
Yeah.
definitely pain. And so just allowing that pain to come up and to be released. And the pain that we're experiencing is the attachment that we had to that person, that individual, to maybe whatever we did every day in our lives. And so it's simply allowing that pain to come up. So I think, and just acknowledging it, feeling it.
Mhm.
Also creating some ways of bringing that person, maybe having a picture of that person. I love the idea of planting a tree or a place in nature, wherever, so just knowing, having a place where you can stop. Maybe it's every day, depending on the level of whoever that individual is, but just feeling them, feeling their birthdays, their the things that were important in your life. But grief is also about letting go of that attachment to what was.
Mm.
And so we have to go forward in our lives, create new ways of being, because the energy of that individual is no longer there. So there seems to be this hole or this chasm. So we don't fill it up. It just becomes, we go on with our lives. And so some a part of that is just accepting, feeling it, letting go, breathing in the grief is what we would do in yoga, and breathing out, I let go. And just, I don't know if that's how I deal with grief in my own life, through my own physical body. I feel it, I honor it, I notice where I might be attached or tight or something. So that's one way. Some kind of a physical practice, of course spiritual practices as well. So it's definitely a process of feeling it, releasing it over and over and over again for however long. It might be the rest of our lives, but we do that over and over again.
You know, I really like what you said, and especially acknowledging the pain, because most around us don't even want you to acknowledge the pain. They just want you to move on. And you can't move on unless you've acknowledged the pain and then accept it and move on from there. I think for me, the answer to that question, what would I tell someone, you know, in the Western culture? I'd say look into other cultures. How do they respond to death? What are their rituals? How do they handle it? After I've looked at many cultures, I think the Western culture has the hardest and are the most in denial. And the least respectful of the spiritual, emotional side of death and what happens after death. The Westerners just ignore all of that altogether. And after death, there's a whole gamut of things that happens, more than when we are here. And we Westerners deny all of that. And so looking into how others perceive that will help us maybe be less religious about it. And when I say religious, not on what faith or what you believe, but what actual things you do without even thinking about them. Because there's certain things you got to do. When they die, you got to put them in the ground, and then you got to go on from there. And that's not justice for the family or the ones that are dying.
Wow.
And yes, and then so that's a very good point. And see, what happens is people numb the grief. So there's a pill, whatever it is, and without me judging any of that. But everything is in our Western culture is to numb it. No, you don't need to feel that. Just take this pill or whatever. And then we become automatons is what I call it. Zombies. And you'll see that a lot in the grief process. You can easily notice when somebody is in a state of where they're not feeling. They're so lost in the grief. So that's the process that we don't get help or assistance with. It's like, well, you've had enough time. It's time for you to move on and get over this. And of course, the reality is, you don't have to. You carry it we carry it for our whole lives. No matter what age. There's never a time when that person or that memory or whatever it is, feel it every time it comes up. Cry, feel it, let it go. The more you love, the more we grieve, and the more we grieve, the more we also eventually will move into a place where we can feel the joy around that person of their lives, the gifts of their lives. So thank you for bringing that up, Reggie.
That's great. That's great. Another question, because we have people who join us live, but we also have people who might view this conversation because it's recorded. They can go on YouTube or other places and view it. If someone is in the process of dealing with the death of a loved one, experiencing the death of a loved one, what one or two things would you like to share with them as they're going through the process of grief? What takeaways would you like for them to have?
Ah, I
I
don't
know
think
that's
we've
hard
enough
because everybody's
time.
different.
But I would say um, is you're not alone. We
Yes.
all experience this.
Yeah.
Reach out for help. Ask for help. I'm more used to being in the hospice setting where there is so much help available. But even within that, it's ask. There is no question that is dumb or stupid. Just ask. Ask, reach out. Ask for the help. Ask for the support. I deal a lot with caretakers that can be very burnt out.
Yeah.
And Reggie probably sees the same thing, because what happens with a loved one, maybe at some stage of death or dying, and then all of a sudden they rebound, they seem to recover for a while. And the process, is we describe it in hospice, is like a reverse steps of stairs. That they'll reach a plateau, but then they'll start declining. And that process can be very wearing for the caretaker. So a lot of times I always say, the body knows what it's doing. So the person who is in the process of death and dying, if they can relax and go with that, it's really about the people around them who need to understand that they too need care. They need to get breaks. They need to get help. They need respite breaks. They cannot possibly do this all on their own. And sometimes that caretakers there could be one particular person in a family and they're doing it all on their own, and that's they don't have to do that. It's the time to ask for
It's good
help and
advice.
support.
And I
Great.
would
Reggie?
agree, ask for help, but ask for the right help. Ask for those that have an adjoining spirit with you. For an example, if you want to be able to communicate with your loved one and they're telling you to move on, you're crazy for trying to communicate. There's a difference there in consciousness and spirituality. And if you feel one way and you have those that are around you that feel differently, it does not help you. It does not help you express. It does not help you heal. So I do agree that you should ask for help. And I think the most important thing is to have someone with you that understands that process.
Who's like-minded? Like-minded, yeah.
Like-minded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The people that you're
All right.
around are critical.
Our time always goes so quickly, and in the closing minutes, Sherry shared a poem that someone shared with her, and I'd like to give her the opportunity to read that poem as we close out the session, please.
Okay, sure. Thank you, everybody. This poem is called Grief, and it's by Gwen Flowers. So if you did a search on that, you could find it on the internet yourself. When my husband passed, a lot of people shared a lot of things with me, and for some reason, this really resonated with me. It says, I had my own notion of grief. I thought it was the sad time that followed the death of someone you love, and you had to push through it to get to the other side. But I'm learning there is no other side. There is no passing through, but rather there is absorption, adjustment, acceptance. And grief is not something you complete, but rather you endure. Grief is not a task to finish and move on, but an element of yourself, an alteration of your being, a new way of seeing, a new dimension of self.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so
It's
much.
good. Yeah.
Aileen and Reggie and Sherry, thank you so much for this
Thank you, Carolyn.
conversation.
Thank
You
you.
all who joined us today. And if you have any follow-up questions, I can provide the contact information for both Aileen and Reginald if you'd like to reach out. And I look forward to our next conversation in May. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you, Aileen. Thank you,
Thank
Bye,
you.
Reggie.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Carolyn.